Hello everyone, peace be upon you. Before we begin, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and stay with me until the end of the story. Also, leave a comment telling me which city and country you're watching from. I'd love to see how far my story has reached. For those of you who have already subscribed, I sincerely wish you good health, ease in all your affairs, abundant blessings, and may all your hopes and dreams come true. Amen. Now, let's begin the story. Morning came early to Maple and Main Diner. Olivia pushed through the glass door with her elbow, set a stack of menus on the counter, and tied her apron without looking. The coffee machine hummed, the grill warmed up, and the neon sign flickered from close to open. She liked this hour. No noise yet, only the steady rhythm of things waking up. She reset salt shakers, wiped the chrome edge of the bar, and checked the pie case even though she knew which slices were left from last night. By 6:30, Springdale started moving. Boots on the doormat. Cold air slipping in every time the door opened. The first to sit was Mrs. Nora Callahan, same booth, same oatmeal, a patient smile that never rushed anyone. Olivia called her Mrs. Nora, poured hot water for tea, and asked if she wanted raisins today. At the counter, Officer Mark Daniels slid into his regular stool and wrapped his hands around a mug like that alone could end his night shift. 2 beats later, Tommy and Ben McCarthy came through in dusty jackets, joking about the job site and arguing about who forgot the tape measure again. It was the usual group, the kind that made a small town feel steady. Olivia moved the way people who know their place move, quick, calm, seeing what was needed before anyone asked. She wrote orders without looking at the pad. She remembered how Mrs. Nora preferred her toast and which days the McCarthy brothers wanted biscuits and gravy instead of pancakes. She caught Officer Daniels' nod for a refill before he looked up. This was her routine, and it helped her keep the rest of life straight: rent, utilities, groceries, Ethan's sneakers for basketball season, the gas money to get him to practice when the weather turned bad. Ethan was 16, all legs and energy, trying to carry more than a kid should, but Olivia never told him that. He had a game next week at Springdale High. She promised she'd be there if the schedule worked. Promises were tricky when you lived on tips and double shifts, but she kept them whenever she could. The bell over the door rang again, softer this time. A man stepped inside, older, careful with each movement. Olivia noticed him the way she noticed all first-timers, but something about him made her slow down. Coat a little too big. Shoes tired from winter. He walked to the corner booth by the window and sat like he didn't want to bother anyone. She brought a menu and offered coffee. He nodded. Black. His voice sounded like it hadn't been used much. When she set the mug down, steam rose between them and he lifted it with both hands, steadying a small tremor. He didn't open the menu. He reached into his wallet, unfolded 2 worn bills, and said one word. Toast. Olivia glanced at the money, then at his face. She told the kitchen, 1 toast, but on the plate she added eggs and bacon, light on the salt, and a little extra butter. When she brought it over, he looked up as if she had made a mistake. She kept her voice easy. Cook got generous, she said, setting the plate like it was no big deal. He studied her a second, then ate slowly, carefully, leaving nothing behind. When he finished, he folded the napkin small and pushed the $2 toward her again. For the toast. She smiled, slid the bills back to him, and shook her head. You're set. No one else noticed at first. The diner got louder as the breakfast rush peaked. Plates clinked. Orders called out. Linda Rowe, on register today, moved with her usual dry humor, telling Tommy and Ben to stop stealing sugar packets like it was gold. Olivia kept an eye on the corner booth anyway. The old man didn't say anything more. He sat a moment, like he was grateful for the heat, then left as quietly as he came. The bell rang once and the door swung shut. The next morning, he returned. Same time, same booth, same nod for coffee. Olivia brought the mug before he asked. He ordered toast again, and she did the same mistake again, slipping in oatmeal with brown sugar because the wind outside cut harder than yesterday. He didn't protest. He ate. He tapped the rim of the cup twice when he wanted a refill, a small code only the two of them seemed to understand. By the third morning, Linda noticed. "Your guy's back," she said under her breath, not unkind, just curious. Olivia shrugged. "He likes the window." Linda looked toward the booth. "He looks like winter." Olivia didn't answer. She carried a plate, checked on Mrs. Nora, and moved on. Around town, days in late winter were all the same. Gray sky, slippery sidewalk, the smell of laundry soap drifting up from the coin laundromat under Olivia and Ethan's apartment. Nights, Olivia sorted bills at the little table by the window and counted tips twice because it was easy to miss $10 when your eyes burned. Ethan finished homework and asked if she would watch him shoot at Maple Street Court on Sunday if the snow cleared. "Yeah," she said, meaning it. They made dinner simple, cleaned up, and slept light. Back at the diner, the old man kept to the corner. He didn't share much, but he carried himself with a neatness that stood out. He folded his napkin just so. He never left a mess. He nodded to thank her, not with a smile, but with a look that felt steady, like a handshake without hands. When someone bumped his table by accident, he shifted his cup so it wouldn't spill and didn't complain. People in small towns see things even when they pretend they don't. Officer Daniels noticed Olivia spending an extra beat at that booth. The McCarthy brothers made a joke about a secret fancy boyfriend, then apologized when Olivia didn't laugh. Mrs. Nora, who watched everything without judging, patted Olivia's hand when she walked by. "You have a good heart," she said, simple as that. Olivia nodded once and went back to work. One afternoon, after the lunch crowd thinned, the old man left something under the sugar caddy. Olivia found it while wiping down the table. A coin, old and rubbed smooth at the edges. She turned it in her palm. It wasn't about money. It felt like a thank you from someone who didn't want to make a scene. The next morning she set his coffee down and slid the coin toward him. "You left this." He met her eyes, pushed it back gently, and said, "For you." 2 words, clear. She tucked it into her apron pocket and didn't say more. There were bills due this week. There was a rent notice taped crooked on the fridge at home. There was a pair of basketball shoes Ethan had circled in a catalog that cost more than Olivia wanted to admit. She still brought the eggs, the soup on colder days, and once a slice of pie Nora said tasted like Sunday. It wasn't about being a hero. It was about how a person should be treated when they show up hungry and tired and try not to take up space. The days stacked up. The diner built its little web the way it always did. The jukebox in the corner stuttered through old songs. Linda called out orders in a voice that could cut through steam. Mark finished his shift and promised to bring a space heater for the backdoor draft. Tommy and Ben argued about which one would finally ask the cashier at the hardware store to coffee. And in the corner, by the window that caught the weak Ohio sun, the old man, Mr. Henry Caldwell, though Olivia didn't know his name yet, sat, ate, and nodded. On a morning when the sky felt lower than usual, Olivia stood still a moment behind the counter and looked across the room. She saw the whole picture, her people, her place, her routine, the quiet line of care that ran from the coffee pot to that corner booth. She didn't know where it would lead. She only knew she would show up tomorrow and do the same thing again. Because the diner was more than a job. It was where small choices counted. It was where she could keep the world steady, even if it was just for the length of a cup of coffee. And the next morning, that cup of coffee felt heavier, like the weight of keeping things steady had settled right into Olivia's hands. The sky hung low over Springdale, the kind of gray that pressed on your shoulders. She unlocked Maple and Main, clicked the neon sign on, and listened to the familiar hum of the fryer warming. Routine set her pace, but the room felt different, as if the air itself was waiting for something to happen. Nora came in first, slow and steady, her knit hat still dusted with frost. Olivia set oatmeal, slid a small honey packet across, and got a soft pat on the wrist in return. Mark showed up after, rubbing the bridge of his nose, joking that the station's coffee could strip paint. She refilled him without asking. A few beats later, the McCarthy brothers crashed in like a gust of February wind, laughing too loud, complaining about a supplier who shipped the wrong nails. Ordinary things. Good noise. Then the doorbell chimed and Caldwell took the corner booth like he always did, coat careful on the seat, hands wrapped around a black coffee. Toast again, and again Olivia added more, calling it a kitchen slip, letting the lie land gently. He didn't argue. He never did. 2 taps on the rim for a refill. A nod that said more than words. By 8:30 the diner filled. A trucker she didn't know well muttered just loud enough for the closest booth to hear. Some folks here are too kind for their own good. His eyes flicked toward the window booth. Olivia felt it prickle across the room. Linda, wiping the counter, leaned closer and kept her voice even. You can't pour from an empty pot, Liv. It wasn't mean. It was math. The advice landed anyway. Tips were thinner that week. Olivia sorted receipts at the end of her shift and realized she'd come up short after rent. At home, the fridge carried a taped list, power due Friday, gas by Tuesday, groceries penciled under both with a question mark. She counted singles at the kitchen table while Ethan laced his basketball shoes and tried not to look worried. You'll be there Saturday? He asked. If the court's not iced over, she said, and willed the numbers to stretch. The gossip sharpened in small-town ways. A guy at the counter asked if the diner was running a charity line now, then laughed to make it sound like a joke. 2 ladies near the door whispered about boundaries. Olivia kept her face neutral and stacked plates with steady hands. Nora's eyes softened. Mark left an extra bill without saying a word. The McCarthy brothers, after teasing, offered to fix the back door draft for free next Sunday. People in Springdale didn't line up neatly on one side or the other, they just showed themselves in small choices, same as Olivia did. Snow hardened overnight into a slick crust, and the next morning Caldwell was late. Olivia glanced at the door every time the bell chimed and felt an odd ache when it wasn't him. He came in finally, red-cheeked and wind-stung, breathing short. She put chicken noodle soup in front of him with the coffee, no story about the kitchen this time. He didn't smile, but the set of his shoulders loosened. He slid something across the table when he finished, a worn photograph, edges soft from years inside a wallet. A younger man stood straight beside a woman with an open smile. Olivia didn't ask names. She's lovely, she said, and slid it back. A flicker of something like warmth crossed his face, there and gone. On Thursday, a black SUV idled across the street longer than most folks would. Not the kind with rust on the wheel wells, not local. Windows tinted dark enough to turn the morning into mirrors. It pulled off before anyone could stare too long, but Linda watched it in the reflection of the pie case. You see that? Olivia nodded once. She didn't add a thought. She kept moving, plates and coffee and plates, but the hair along her arms lifted like the room had caught a draft only she could feel. By evening, the murmurs spread in crooked lines. Someone said Caldwell had been seen downtown talking to a banker. Someone else said he'd once owned half of Cincinnati. A third said he was just a drifter with good posture. The stories didn't match. Olivia didn't chase any of them. She folded napkins, counted forks, and set the morning coffee filter before locking up, then walked home through air that bit her lungs. In their apartment over the laundromat, machines thumped below like a slow heartbeat. She and Ethan ate boxed mac and cheese, and he told her his coach thought he should try for point guard. You should, she said. You see the court. He waited a beat, then asked, quieter, people at school talk about the diner. About you. About that guy. Olivia set her fork down. People talk when they don't know. We'll do what's right anyway. He nodded like he understood more than she wanted him to. Friday brought a crowd, a delivery of eggs that arrived late, and a line at the door that turned the small room loud and bright. Caldwell's booth stayed a soft pocket of quiet in the corner. Olivia moved toward him as if on a track she couldn't step off, topped his coffee, and felt Linda's look, part caution, part care. "I know," Olivia said under her breath. "I'm watching the numbers." "Watch yourself, too," Linda murmured. The coin from earlier, smooth, old, lived in Olivia's apron like a small anchor. She touched it between tables when worry started clawing at her. Not because it was worth anything, but because it meant she wasn't pouring into nothing. Someone on the other end felt it. Late that afternoon, Mark lingered at the door longer than usual after paying. "You want me to swing by in the morning?" he asked. "Weird car, other day." Olivia shook her head. "We're all right." He didn't push, but he scanned the street before he left, habit more than fear. Saturday came with bright, brittle sun and the sharp squeak of boots on packed snow. Ethan's game was moved to next week because the gym's heater broke, which felt like a small mercy to Olivia's schedule. The diner filled, emptied, filled again. Caldwell ate in his careful way. When he stood to leave, he paused, just long enough for Olivia to notice. Then he nodded once, deeper than usual, and went out into the cold. That night, the laundromat thrummed steady below their floor. Olivia stacked tip money by tens and fives, made rent with $2 to spare, and wrote "shoes later" next to Ethan's circle in the catalog. She stood at the window and watched a plow push snow into a dull ridge along Maple Street. Across town, lights clicked off room by room like a slow wave. She thought about kindness as a line you draw again each day, not because anyone signs it or sees it but because it makes the shape of who you are. Sunday morning, she woke before her alarm, the room still blue with early light. She could almost recite the day ahead: open, brew, flip the sign, first coffee for Nora, the long pour for Mark, the loud laugh from the McCarthys, toast for the corner booth, plus what she decided to add. Keep the world steady, cup by cup. She tightened her apron and stepped into the cold, not knowing that the line she'd been drawing so faithfully was leading straight toward something larger than the diner, larger than Springdale, larger than rent notices and reheated soup. The first clue had already rolled past in dark glass and silent tires. The next would not pass so quietly. It didn't pass quietly at all. By sunrise, Springdale felt like it had a low hum running under the snow, a kind of electricity you can't see but you know is there. Olivia unlocked Maple and Main, flipped the sign, and tried to convince herself it was just another morning. The fryer warmed, the coffee bloomed, the glass fogged at the corners. She lined up mugs, counted spoons, breathed in the smell that usually settled her. Not today. Nora arrived first, careful steps, careful smile. Olivia set the oatmeal down without asking and caught the extra squeeze of Nora's hand, an old woman's version of "hold steady." Mark came next, shoulders tight under his jacket, eyes doing that slow sweep cops learn to do even when they're off duty. He didn't sit right away. He stood near the window like he was measuring the street, then eased onto the stool and wrapped his fingers around the mug. "Cold," he said, but they both knew he wasn't talking about the weather. She poured. He let the heat do its work. The McCarthys blew in with jokes, then saw Mark's face and dialed it back. Work talk filled space, concrete, permits, a nail gun that quit in the middle of a job like it had feelings. Olivia let the noise wrap the room. Ordinary sound is a kind of armor. She moved through it, plates and napkins and check slips, the way a swimmer trusts the lane lines. Caldwell came later than usual, a faint rasp to his breathing, snow clinging in a lace along his coat hem. Corner booth, window seat, hands around the coffee before the steam even rose. Toast, again. Olivia added eggs, again. No performance about the cook this time. Just the plate, the small nod he gave that meant he'd take what she offered and treat it like it mattered. He ate the way he did everything, neat, deliberate, as if wasting crumbs was a kind of rudeness. At 8:15, a dark SUV turned onto Maple, slower than the rest of the traffic. Not the same one as before. Different plate. Same tint. It rolled past the diner once, twice, then parked half a block down with a line of sight straight through the front windows. Linda watched it in the reflection of the stainless counter. "New friend?" she asked, voice dry as toast. Olivia stacked plates. "Maybe he's just lost." Linda didn't answer, but she wiped the same spot longer than wiping takes. The gossip came in waves you could time by the bell on the door. Two church ladies with polite voices that cut like paper. A contractor who wanted to know if Olivia planned to sponsor more breakfasts this month. A teenager with a phone out, taking a too casual pan of the room for his stories. Olivia kept her face the way she kept the coffee, steady. She wasn't out here to win arguments. She was out here to do the job and keep the line she'd drawn from herself to that corner booth from breaking. Ethan texted between classes, coach switched practice to later. "You good if I stay late?" She thumbed back, "Yes. Proud of you. Also, lock the door." It wasn't fear exactly. It was the sense that the day had been chosen for something and hadn't told her what yet. Near 10, the SUV down the block pulled away. 15 minutes later, another one took its place. Not subtle. Mark paid his check and stood. "I'll float by at lunch," he said. Olivia nodded, grateful in the way that doesn't need thanks out loud. He paused at the corner booth, a quiet check-in that looked like nothing. Caldwell lifted his eyes once, met Mark's, and dropped them back to the cup. It wasn't a challenge. It was a simple acknowledgement. "I see the pieces on the board." Money pressed in. Tips had been thin all week. The landlord's note on the fridge felt louder than any whisper in the diner. Ethan's circled shoes in the catalog waited like a small promise Olivia didn't want to break. She caught herself doing math in the space between pouring cream and dropping checks, making choices a dime at a time. There was a slice of pie she could have sold that she set down in front of Caldwell instead. She felt the loss and chose it anyway. A pair of out-of-towners came through just before lunch. Crowd, boots clean, coats expensive, the kind of people passing through Springdale on their way to someplace they'd brag about later. They took the booth behind Caldwell and pretended not to look. One of them said it under his breath, just loud enough to land, "Whole place smells like charity." Linda's head tipped, but Olivia reached the booth first. "Everything tasting all right?" she asked. It was neutral enough to diffuse. They grunted something that could pass for yes. When she turned, she caught Caldwell's reflection in the glass, a man who'd been insulted by bigger rooms and worse men, and learned to carry on without making an enemy out of every fool. Tiny acts make counterweights. Nora paid and left a folded note under her spoon, "Keep going." The McCarthys forgot their change twice. Mark, true to his word, drifted back with a story about a traffic stop that was really a streetside patrol. Linda found a space heater in the back closet and set it near the draft by the door, muttering that it was for the customers, but aiming the blower just so toward the corner booth. At 2, the sky brightened the way winter skies sometimes do right before the cold bites deeper. The second SUV left. 10 quiet minutes. Then a third rolled up and didn't bother to pretend. It stopped directly in front of Maple and Main. The engine stayed on. No one got out. You could feel the room stiffen. Olivia wiped a clean counter. Then she took a fresh pot of coffee to Caldwell like the street wasn't performing outside. He tapped the rim twice without looking up and she poured until the cup almost overflowed, then stopped on a breath, a line she knew how to catch. The afternoon lull should have brought relief. It brought a decision. Linda set 2 bills on the counter. "You can clock out early if you want," she said. "I'll cover." "Look slow." Olivia heard the mercy in it. She also heard the warning. She shook her head. "I'll stay." Linda studied her a beat and then nodded, like a person saluting a stubborn ship captain who knows her own boat. Ethan came by after school, backpack over one shoulder, cheeks bright from the wind. He didn't even look at the SUV. He looked at his sister. "You need me to grab milk on the way home?" he asked. She almost laughed. It came out as a thin smile. "Please." He turned to leave, then glanced toward the corner booth and gave a small nod a kid doesn't owe a stranger. Caldwell returned it an inch. That was all. When dusk pushed up against the glass, the third SUV pulled away. Streetlights flickered on. Maple Street took on the quiet that makes winter feel like it carries secrets. Olivia counted the drawer and came up shy. Linda slid a 5 across without looking like she'd done it. "You dropped this earlier," she said. They both knew she hadn't. "I'll put it toward dish soap," Olivia said, because accepting help is easier if it has a job. Lockup went fast. Olivia tucked the old coin deeper into her apron pocket before hanging it on the hook, then thought better and moved it to her coat. The laundromat below the apartment thumped out its tired rhythm. They ate soup that tasted better than it should have, laughed once at a stupid meme Ethan shoved across the table, and then let the apartment go quiet. Outside, tires shushed along Maple. Somewhere down the block, someone's dog barked twice and stopped. Olivia stood at the window and watched nothing. The nothing watched back. She set her alarm for earlier than usual and lay in the dark thinking about tiny choices. You decide to pour a little more coffee. You decide to look someone in the eye and see a person instead of a problem. You decide to keep your voice even when somebody wants to make a show of you. None of it fixes a broken heater in a school gym. None of it pays rent on time by magic. But it draws a line from who you were yesterday to who you will be tomorrow, and that line is what keeps you from getting lost. Morning came thin and pale. Olivia dressed in the blue uniform that always smelled like the diner no matter how often she washed it. She walked through air that bit her lungs and let herself into the little room that had become more than a job. Lights on. Coffee grounds leveled. Neon flipped. She stacked the menus and told herself she was ready for whatever the day had decided to be. It didn't make her wait. The bell over the door had just settled from the first swing when engines, more than one, rolled into place outside, low and synchronized, the kind of sound that says the quiet part out loud settled against the glass, low and certain, and the room seemed to inhale and hold it. Olivia didn't move at first. She set the stack of menus down, straightened them once, and turned to face the windows. Four black SUVs, identical and impenetrable, slid into position like they were taking assigned seats in a story already written. Doors stayed closed. Engines idled in a steady, shared heartbeat. Nora arrived on the dot, slower than usual, the bell above the door giving one small ring that sounded fragile in the new quiet. Olivia steered her gently to a booth away from the windows, set the oatmeal down without the usual small talk, and poured hot tea like ceremony could anchor the room. Mark came in tight and alert, the kind of posture that means every detail has already been measured and filed. He didn't sit. He looked out once, then gave Olivia a look that wasn't a question. She nodded. He chose the counter with a view of the door. The SUVs exhaled their doors in near unison. Men in dark suits stepped out with the calm of people who have practiced this exact sequence, each taking a place that made sense only if you'd learned the choreography. No badges flashed, no guns drawn, no hard edges shown, just a presence that carried authority because it didn't have to announce it. One man moved a half step ahead of the others. Mid-40s, sharp lines in the face, not unkind, not warm. Jonathan Pierce, though no one inside had his name yet. He scanned once, door, counter, pie case reflection, back exit, and then pushed into the diner with a hand light on the glass. The bell rang and went quiet. He took off his gloves like he was careful with other people's spaces and crossed the tile without his shoes making a sound. His eyes found the corner booth with no hesitation. Caldwell had already turned to face them, hands resting flat on either side of his coffee like he'd been waiting for a train he knew would come. Olivia's body moved before her head did. She went to the booth, topped off the cup, and set the pot back on its metal plate, a small, normal thing in a moment that wasn't normal at all. Everything slowed without losing time. Conversations thinned to the edges of words. Forks paused above plates. Even the fryer hiss seemed to tuck itself into a smaller lane. Piers stopped at the end of the aisle and left just enough space to mean respect. Two of his team angled to the side exits, not threatening, just present. The third stood by the door, eyes soft but everywhere. Mark's jaw worked once like he had an opinion and locked it away. Caldwell didn't stand right away. He lifted the cup, took one small drink, and set it down in a circle of steam that spread and disappeared. Then he rose, steady as a man who has practiced being looked at and learned how to make that weight sit where he wanted it. He smoothed his coat in a motion that said habit, not vanity. He met Olivia's eyes first. A nod, deeper than their usual code, slower, an acknowledgement with a little more thread in it. She felt her throat go tight and kept her face even. No speeches followed. Piers stepped in just enough to be heard and used a voice shaped for rooms that listen. He spoke quietly to Caldwell, words the room didn't need to catch. "We're ready, sir, we'll go when you are." The "sir" wasn't performance. It was muscle memory. Caldwell answered with the same calm that had marked him since the first day he'd walked through the door. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask who had sent them. He didn't ask anything. He had the look of a man who'd returned to a name he used to carry and found it still fit, even if it felt heavier now. Olivia noticed the tiny things because tiny things were her trade. The way Pierce's eyes flickered, just once, to the plate that always carried more than toast. The way one agent eased his stance when Caldwell stood, as if old habit told him to make room. The way Nora set her spoon down and folded her hands like she was in church. The way Linda planted herself behind the register and became, without announcing it, the line that said this was still their diner, not a stage rented out for somebody else's scene. Caldwell turned slightly and gave the room one sweep that didn't read as goodbye so much as gratitude stretched thin across a lot of feeling. He picked up nothing, left nothing, said almost nothing. To Olivia he gave the only words the moment required, voice low and steady enough that it reached only her. "Thank you." Simple and exact. She didn't trust her voice, so she answered with a nod that tried to say more than it could hold. They moved as one. Piers stepped back, creating a path that respected the corner booth as the place it had been. The men in suits flanked without crowding. Mark didn't rise, but he straightened, ready to be useful if the useful thing was staying put. The bell rang again as the door opened, and cold air folded into warm coffee steam in a whirl that smelled like two worlds touching. Outside, the SUVs opened their doors like parentheses. Caldwell walked between them, head high but not arrogant, coat pulling at the shoulders in a way Olivia hadn't noticed until now, a good coat, old, cared for. He slid into the middle car, not the front, not the rear. Piers gave one brief, almost human smile toward the diner, a gesture that said, "We see what this place is." Then he took his seat, the doors closed, and the engines aligned their rhythm again. The convoy pulled out without rush and without waste. The room didn't breathe at first. Then sound trickled back in strange places. The fryer hiss remembered itself. A fork clicked on a plate. Somewhere, the old jukebox coughed up the first note of a song and changed its mind. Linda cleared her throat like she was moving air back into the space. Mark set down enough cash to cover a breakfast he hadn't eaten and said he'd be around. Nora reached across her table and patted the sticky side of the booth as if blessing it. Olivia went to the corner and stood looking at the small circle of condensation his cup had left. She wiped it once and it reappeared in a faint ring, then faded. She didn't move the coin in her coat pocket, but she felt it, a cool weight that made sense now in a way that had nothing to do with money. The gossip machine tried to crank, two voices at the counter, "Did you see?" and stalled under the part of the room that had turned protective. The McCarthys came in late, read the air in one glance, and toned down. Linda poured water for the table near the door like the act of tending could push back whatever shock wanted to plant itself. Lunch service arrived because life insists. Plates went out. Checks came back. The sun climbed and threw a harder light across the floor that made the chrome shine. Every now and then, someone looked at the window like the glass might tell them more. It told the same winter story it had told for 2 months straight: road salt, tire lines, the echo of cold. In the lull between lunch and the small afternoon crowd, Olivia stood behind the counter, laid a napkin flat, and smoothed it with her palm. Her hands had their own memory of this day now, a weight, a shape, a pattern they would recognize again. She poured herself a half cup and didn't drink it. She didn't need caffeine. She needed the ritual. Across the room, the booth sat ordinary again, except now it was the kind of ordinary that belongs to a place after something true has been spoken there. When the bell over the door finally broke the quiet with a familiar cling, she was grateful for it. But it wasn't the regular after-school pack or a tourist looking for directions. It was a different kind of arrival: brisk steps, clipped coat, a neat envelope in a careful hand. Not the SUVs. Not the suits from earlier. Young, composed, the look of someone carrying a message that mattered. He paused, adjusted his breath to the room's rhythm, and asked for Olivia by name. She didn't need anyone to point her out. She was the gravity here and everyone knew it. He approached with the soft authority of a person who had been told to treat this place with the respect it had earned. He introduced himself with a last name that meant the convoy hadn't vanished into a story you tell to fill silence. He said there was something she should read when she had a moment. He set the envelope on the counter like it was fragile, like it held more than paper. Olivia felt the day shift again, not as loud as engines, not as sharp as a door chime, but definite. The room had witnessed the taking. Now it would witness the answer. She slid the envelope close without opening it, the way you hold on to warmth before you let it into your bones. The diner steadied under her hands. Cups lined up. Plates waited. Outside, traffic thinned as the light began its early winter slide. She looked toward the corner booth one more time, memorized it as it was, and then turned back to the counter, ready to hear the words that would put shape to everything her instincts already knew. Olivia slipped a finger under the envelope flap and opened it with the care you give to something that might rearrange your day. The paper inside was thick, the handwriting steady, dark ink pressed like a person who meant every stroke. She read the greeting first, simple and formal, then the name, Henry Caldwell. Not Mr., not the quiet man by the window, but a name that sat like a door clicking open. He'd written that he came to Maple and Maine to disappear without disappearing from himself. He wrote that the corner booth gave him a way to belong without explanation. He wrote that the coffee was hot and the food was good, yes, but it was the way Olivia set things down, like nothing was owed and nothing was wasted, that made him remember who he was when no one was looking. He thanked her for toast that was never just toast, for the soup that showed up when the wind cut hard, for pretending the kitchen had made mistakes so he didn't have to refuse kindness. He said he hadn't forgotten how to speak, he had just needed to be somewhere no one demanded it. Then there was a line that made Olivia pause and steady the letter with both hands: "You didn't treat me like a problem to solve. You treated me like a person." The rest told the shape of the man she had guessed it without words: loss that pulled the noise out of a life, pressure that made quiet feel like the only safe room. He wrote that he would be leaving with people who knew his history and owed him honesty. He wrote that he wouldn't be back soon, maybe not ever, not to the booth, not to the same cup, but that the dignity she offered had already done the part of the work that mattered. She folded the letter along its crease, then unfolded it and read it again, slower. When she finally looked up, the young man who'd brought it, Harold Pierce, was still there, posture measured, eyes soft. "He asked me to wait," he said, voice low, "in case you had questions." Olivia shook her head, not no, but not yet. Words felt too small. Linda sidled closer, pretending to tidy a sugar caddy, and caught enough of Olivia's face to understand. Nora watched from her booth with the pride older women carry when a younger one stands her ground. Mark, who had come back like he said he would, shifted so he could see both the door and the letter without crowding either. Tell him, Olivia began, then stopped. Simpler. Cleaner. Tell him I read every word. Harold nodded like he could deliver tone as well as phrasing. He placed a neat business card beside the register. If you ever need to reach us, he said, for any reason. He didn't say money. He didn't say favor. He didn't say opportunity. He said reach, which was the right verb for a person who didn't ask for anything when it wasn't offered. The afternoon moved again. People paid and left and others came in, drawn by habit more than hunger. The gossip that had sharpened into knives dulled into spoons. A man who had muttered earlier about charity returned, ordered coffee, and left a tip that was larger than his check with no note to make it cute. The two out-of-towners from yesterday were nowhere to be seen. The street held only regular cars now, wintersalt streaked and ordinary. When the lull hit, Linda leaned an elbow on the counter. You okay? She asked, the kind of question that isn't fishing for drama. I'm good, Olivia said, and surprised herself by meaning it. Good didn't equal easy. It meant anchored. Linda nodded once and went back to the register with a lighter step. Mark finished his cup, left a second bill just under the saucer, and said he'd check the alley light out back later. Nora walked up with her cane and slipped a peppermint into Olivia's palm like a benediction. For your sweet, she said, and that was that. Evening rose early the way it does in February, the windows turning the street into a mirror. Ethan pushed in after school, hair windmussed, backpack heavy. He clocked the room's new quiet and came straight to the counter. Everything good? He asked. Olivia handed him the letter without commentary. He read slow, mouth set, eyes moving line by line with the concentration he saved for game film. At the end, he blinked hard and cleared his throat. So, he said, trying on a grin that didn't quite hold, you fed a CEO and fixed a soul. I poured coffee, she said, and they both knew that wasn't the whole truth. They closed a little later than usual because people lingered, not needy, not nosy, just present. The McCarthys fixed the draft by the back door with a scrap of weather strip they'd found in the truck, refused cash, and left with promises to check the hinge tomorrow. Linda printed the nightly report and frowned when the math said they'd sold one slice of pie less than they should have, then tore the paper in half and tossed it. Consider it comped by the universe, she said. The jukebox hiccuped back to life and delivered a song that sounded like a road rolling out flat. At home above the laundromat, the machines thumped a sleepy rhythm. Olivia taped the power receipt to the fridge with a small satisfaction that wasn't about the number but about the direction. She slid Caldwell's letter into a clear sleeve and tucked it behind a magnet near Ethan's practice schedule. The old coin went into a short glass on the windowsill where the morning would find it first. They ate soup and shared bread and didn't push words they didn't need. Before bed, Ethan said, "You coming to the court if it's not iced?" "If it's a sheet of ice, I'll bring a shovel," she said, and he laughed the laugh that loosens a day's knots. The next morning, Maple and Maine felt different in a way only people who come every day would feel. Not fancier, not louder, just steadier, like the room had decided to hold what it had learned. Olivia moved through tasks with the same hands but a new pace inside her chest. She didn't scan the street for SUVs. She watched for Nora's smile and Mark's nod and the way dawn light made the chrome shine. When she reached the corner booth, she set a fresh cup down out of habit and caught herself, then left it there anyway. The steam rose once and joined the air. Midday, Harold returned alone, coat open to show a suit built for rooms where the carpet makes your shoes sound different. He removed his gloves and approached the counter like he'd been briefed on how to step into someone else's home. "He asked me to add one thing," he said. He slid a small card across. On it, in the same neat hand as the letter, was a line, "The world is less cold because you are in it." H.C. No signature flourish. No logo. Just a sentence that did what good sentences do, it landed and kept landing, quietly, every time you looked its way. Olivia didn't ask for more. She didn't ask what Caldwell's next days would look like, or what city or boardroom or quiet room he'd sit in next. She didn't ask what the SUVs meant in terms of titles or accounts or headlines. Those belonged to other stories. This one belonged to a diner and a cup and a steady set of choices. "Tell him we're open at 6, she said, a smile tilting the words so they meant more than the hours on the door. Harold nodded with a hint of a grin, like he understood the joke and the vow inside it. Word spread in Springdale, not like scandal, not like spectacle, but like a weather report everyone had felt anyway. The diner was the place where somebody remembered your second refill before you asked, where a kid brought his homework and got hot chocolate on the house if he said please, where a man who had every reason to guard his name sat without it and was seen just the same. The bite behind the whispers dulled. People tipped a little better, not out of guilt, but out of recognition. They wanted to be part of the line Olivia drew every morning. By closing, she was tired in the good way. She counted the drawer and didn't come up shy. She wrote "Saturday Court" on a sticky note and stuck it under the clock so she'd leave 5 minutes early and keep a promise. She wiped the corner booth last, slow, one hand flat on the laminate, the way you do when you're both cleaning and thanking. Outside, snow sifted down in a thin, almost polite veil. The streetlights made it glow. On the walk home, breath white and steady, Olivia thought about how problems never actually vanish, they just get faced with a better center of gravity. Rent would still be due next month. The heater would break again. Someone would say a foolish thing and mean it. But she had proof now, written, folded, tucked behind a magnet, that what she chose to do mattered in a way that money couldn't measure and noise couldn't undo. Tomorrow would be coffee and eggs and toast and names and eye contact and the same line drawn from who she was to who she meant to be. And somewhere past Cincinnati or New York or wherever the SUVs took him, a man would carry a booth-shaped piece of warmth he found in a winter diner with a bell over the door and a waitress who knew how to pour more than coffee. And in Springdale, that same bell kept ringing, the kind of sound that tells you life is still moving even when a chapter has closed. Morning gathered itself over Maple and Main with a pale wash of light, salt lines on the curb, and breath that turned white for a beat and vanished. Olivia unlocked the door, flipped the sign, and let the aroma of coffee pull the room awake. Nothing dramatic waited in the street. No shadows in the glass, no engines synced like a heartbeat. Just the ordinary, good and stubborn. She didn't expect him to come back. That wasn't the point anymore. What settled in her chest was quieter than hope and stronger than certainty. It was the knowledge that what she did inside these four walls reached farther than she could see. She set out mugs, checked the pie case, and touched the old coin on the sill with her fingertip like a small ritual of thanks. Nora arrived with a scarf striped like winter berries, and the two of them settled into their familiar exchange, oatmeal, honey, a soft pat on the wrist. Mark followed with the walk of someone who'd had a decent night. He told Olivia the alley light was fixed and pretended he hadn't checked the street twice before he came in. Tommy and Ben stomped snow off their boots, teased each other about a crooked cut, and promised to bring a new weather strip next week. Linda slid in behind the register, hair tucked and eyes bright, and muttered that she'd dreamed about overcooked bacon again, which they all understood as a sign of a normal week ahead. The corner booth looked ordinary, but it carried a layer only regulars could feel. People gave it a second's worth of respect the way you do a veteran's cap or a family photo on a mantle. Olivia wiped it a touch slower, not sentimental, just present. Mid-morning, she caught herself setting a cup there by habit and then leaving it as a small offering to the quiet. Steam curled once and drifted away. Ethan came in between classes for a grilled cheese and a pep talk he didn't admit he wanted. He told her the gym heater was humming again and Saturday's game was back on. She wrote, "Leave early," on a sticky note and stuck it to the register where Linda would see it and chase her out if she tried to stay. "Point guard?" she asked, and he shrugged the proud shrug that says yes without making a speech. Before he left, he tapped the coin glass with one knuckle, a tiny knock on wood for a good week. The letter lived under a magnet by their schedule at home. Olivia read it sometimes before bed, not to reopen the drama, but to keep her compass set. It reminded her that care isn't theory. It's practiced in refills and eye contact and how you set a plate down. It's not free of cost, it's chosen in the face of cost. That was the lesson worth carrying into mornings that looked like every other morning on the outside. Word had settled around town in a decent way. The ones who'd sharpened their whispers dulled them. A man who had called the place a charity line now straightened chairs on his way out without being asked. Teenagers pocketed their phones a little quicker when Nora passed their table, like the room had rules you didn't have to post. 2 new faces came in from the highway because somebody at the gas station said the coffee here tasted like somebody cared. They ordered pie first, which was fine by Olivia. Some days you start with dessert. Sometime after the lunch rush, the door chimed and a woman in a navy peacoat stepped in, mid-30s, wind-pink cheeks, the look of a person who had taken a detour on purpose. She asked for the corner booth and a coffee. She didn't look around like a tourist of rumor, she set her phone face down and watched the snow. When Olivia brought the mug, the woman smiled the kind of smile that belongs to a memory, not a performance. "I'm passing through," she said. "My mother taught 2nd grade 2 towns over. She liked this diner." Said the coffee made winter feel shorter. Olivia nodded, not inviting a story, not refusing one. The woman ran a finger along the edge of the table. "Places like this keep people from drifting." She left a tip that said she understood how keeping works. By late afternoon the sun slipped low, laying a lane of gold across the chrome. Linda wiped down the counter and broke the silence without breaking the calm. "You different," she said, no edge in it, just noticing. "Feels like you got more room inside." Olivia laughed softly. "Maybe I stopped saving a seat for doubt." Linda made a noncommittal sound that translated to proud and went to argue with the receipt printer. That evening, Olivia closed 5 minutes early because promises count. The bell over the gym door echoed sharp against cinderblock, and Maple Street Court smelled like varnish and cheering. She found a spot on the bleachers where she could see the whole floor. Ethan dribbled high shoulder, called a play with a look, and threaded a pass that met his teammate in stride. It wasn't flashy. It was clean. She clapped, not loud, but steady. When the buzzer sounded and sneakers squeaked toward the handshake line, she felt the same settled note she'd felt yesterday behind the counter. You keep the line from who you were to who you mean to be. You draw it again tomorrow. They walked home under a thin moon. The laundromat droned a soft, watery lullaby below their apartment. At the table, they cut a slice of leftover pie in half and ate it straight from the tin because dishes could wait. Ethan asked if they could move the coin to the middle of the sill, so the sun hits it first. They did. He asked if good things were going to keep happening now. She told him good things aren't guaranteed, but good work compounds. Like practice, he said. Exactly, she answered, and the room felt warmer for it. The next morning, a plain envelope arrived with no return address, just the diner's name written in careful block letters. Inside was a card. No crest. No emboss. The same hand she knew by now. 2 lines, your steadiness helped me remember mine. Keep setting the table. H.C. Olivia stood a full minute with the card in her hand before sliding it into the sleeve behind the magnet, right next to the first letter. She didn't tell the room. The room didn't need telling. It already knew how to hold something true without breaking it. Weeks turned toward March. The sky traded gray for a softer blue, the kind that pretends spring and keeps its promise a day at a time. Salt dust lifted from curbs, and Nora switched from oatmeal to toast. Mark talked about baseball starting up and how folks do dumber things in warm weather. The McCarthys argued about mulch. Linda bought a new tip jar with a joke label that said, "College Fund for the Pie," and it worked. Tourists came in with maps and left with directions that included, "Don't miss the court at sunset." The bell kept tally of lives overlapping. Sometimes strangers asked Olivia if she was the woman from the story they'd half heard. She'd smile and say she was the woman with the coffee. If they pressed, she'd point at the menu and recommend the meatloaf special and the lemon pie and how the corner booth got the best light in winter. She wasn't guarding a secret. She was guarding the scale. Big stories belong somewhere, but so do small mornings, and you can't let one crush the other. On a mild Thursday, Harold Pierce passed through alone on his way to Cincinnati. He didn't bring an envelope. He brought a short hello, a weather report, and a message that wasn't heavy enough to need paper. "He's well," Harold said, and you could tell from how he said it he meant more than health. He paid for his coffee, tipped more than the bill, and told Olivia, "He keeps a window seat." "So do we," she said, and they both let the smile land. What remained for Olivia wasn't a headline or a favor or a new sign on the door. It was muscle memory tied to meaning. She poured without spilling, she refilled without being asked, she noticed when someone's hands shook and set the cup down closer. She did math at the end of the night and paid what she could and made a list for what came next. She kept the coin where the light could find it and the letters where a tired evening could steady itself. None of that changed the price of eggs or the cost of heat. It changed the weight she could carry and the way she carried it. One night, when the diner was closed and the street was the quiet kind, she stood at the window and watched a snow that would be gone by noon. She thought about the corner booth and the man who had sat there until engines came to take him somewhere he was needed. She thought about the lines she drew each morning, cup to hand to heart to habit. She thought about how kindness isn't a rescue plan so much as a weather system you choose to stand in. It doesn't fix what's broken. It makes broken bearable while you work. The bell would ring again tomorrow. Nora would want honey. Mark would want strong. The brothers would want seconds. Linda would want the printer not to jam. Ethan would want the ball in his hands with a minute left. Olivia would want what she had learned to hold. She'd open, flip the sign, level the grounds, line up the cups, and keep the booth ready for whoever needed light. The world outside would do what it does, hurry and shout and measure and forget. Inside, the diner would keep time another way, one plate, one cup, one nod, one small human exchange that seemed ordinary until you traced its ripple. Somewhere past Cincinnati or New York or nowhere you could put on a map, a man kept his own window seat and wrote a line now and then in a careful hand. In Springdale, a waitress kept pouring more than coffee. That was the whole of it and more than enough. The bell over the door would say so in the only language it knew, bright and simple, each time a new day asked if someone here remembered how to set a table for hope. And she did.